Hello, my name is Fred Trotter, and I'm a healthcare data journalist with CareSet. And I'm working. This is the last of the interviews from 2024 Health Data Palooza. It was an amazing meeting. Really enjoyed being there, and we made these video series so that people who couldn't make it, patients who, for whatever reason, because travel is expensive or because of immune reasons. There's a lot of reasons why a patient can't make it. In order to make sure that these patients could understand what happened at Datapalooza when we're talking about the data rights that are so important to them, we brought many of the speakers back and had them do this video cast. I would like to really thank Melanie Fontes Rainier. Am I pronouncing that right?
No.
For joining us. And she is currently the director for Office of Civil Rights, OCR at HHS. Now, that is a very confusing title because the OCR is responsible for a grab bag of things related to civil rights. All kinds of legislation. Congress will put kind of jobs on OCR. And of course, it would be great if we had 100% agreement on what counted as civil rights in this country. We don't quite have that yet. But there are major critical responsibilities that every patient benefits of every day that OCR oversees and maintains, including right of access under HIPAA, No Surprises Act, I think stuff with that. And of course, I'm going to hear more. But I was really excited to hear that someone from OCR was going to Healthcare Data Palooza and speaking because the idea that OCR is using data effectively is really incredibly humbling and exciting to hear. With that, I am going to turn it over to Ms. Rainier for the purposes of her introduction. Do you want to say anything about your role, or shall we jump right into the questions?
Sure. Can you hear me?
I can, perfectly.
Yeah. So the Office for Civil Rights is at HHS. We have offices in 11 cities across the country. We are the only federal civil rights office that does both civil rights, right? So advances civil rights on behalf of people on their age, race, sex, disability, national origin, color, religion, as well as we are in charge of enforcing HIPAA. So we're unique in that respect, and I think it gives us a really unique vantage point across the country. And I am joined by my colleague, Tim Noonan, who is our Health Information Privacy Deputy Director and a civil servant. And so glad to be here.
Tim, welcome. Nice to have you. And feel free to answer or re-answer any of the questions that I'm going to ask Melanie. First question, just generally, what brought you to Healthcare Data Palooza?
Sure. So I think it's really important that, and if you've heard me speak, you've heard me say this before, it's really important at the Office for Civil Rights that we work with our private partners. And in the instances of regulated entities, that is healthcare providers, health plans, clearinghouses, grantees, because we want to make sure that those entities are following the law. It is in everyone's interest across this country for our healthcare system to be following the law, whether it's a civil rights law or it's HIPAA, and to be driving compliance, because that means people's data is secure and protected. That means people aren't being discriminated against, and that means our healthcare system is conferring upon people these benefits that our lawmakers and others have entitled them to, which is really important.
Tim, you want to field that one, or she did kind of knock it out of the park there? So,
don't feel like no, thank you. I think that covers everything. Thank you.
Okay, next question. Are there specific healthcare data sets you're interested or important for your work? You mentioned compliance. Is that something that you focus on from a data perspective? What are your priorities there?
Sure. So I would say a couple things in this space. We can always do better in this space. The reality is that the Office for Civil Rights is a pretty small shop. And so data collection on the civil rights side is something that I think we are continuing to work on and continuing to have more metrics. But when it comes to HIPAA, I think as you're familiar, Fred, we have very public reporting posts, and we put out annually different reports tied to that. Tim, do you want to talk a little bit about that stuff?
Sure. Every year we publish a couple of reports to Congress that give a snapshot of what's happening with our enforcement of HIPAA. Those are available on our website. If you just do OCR HIPAA reports to Congress, that ought to be the first hit that comes up. And so it provides information about our breach investigations as well as our complaint investigations. And we're in the middle of some really disturbing trends right now. There's been a substantial increase in the number of large breaches that get reported to OCR every year. It's a 102% increase from 2018 to 2023. And then more alarmingly is the number of individuals affected annually by large breaches. We've seen 1,001% increase, 1,001
Wow.
From 2018 to 2023. In 2018, it was 15.2 million. In 2023, the last year that we have full data, over 167.8 million. And so more breaches are occurring, and we also know that the major driving forces on these breaches is ransomware and hacking. And I'm sure you'll hear Melanie speak more about how we tie this collection of data to our priorities. We try to be a data-centric investigative agency, and so as that information comes to us, we adjust our enforcement program accordingly.
I think it's also important to, oh, sorry.
No.
I was going to say, I think it's always still important too, right? So when a large breach happens, affecting more than 500 individuals, those are public. They're on our public portal. They get filed with HHS, and that's in part so that there's transparency to the public about when these things happen. And that's a lot of that data Tim just reported out comes from that data set. So it is a public reporting feature to protect the integrity of our healthcare system and the transparency of those breaches, ultimately protecting patient privacy.
And if you'll permit me to try and what I always try to do is provide context for what you're saying so that it's not just, I think I don't know, 80% of the people who go to Datapalooza or policy walks and they just love talking about all these policy things. But I think the average patient needs to understand that in the United States, we have two paradigms for protecting health information that are already regulated. Both of them are breach notifications. One of them is, I think, managed by the FTC. I always get the FTC and the FCC confused, but I think it's the FTC, and that has to do with PHRs and and then there's HIPAA, which manages the breach notifications and breaches for healthcare data that's released, roughly speaking. And of course, there's a lot of complexity here, and there's a wonderful diagram you can find out about which covers you that's on your website, which I recommend people look at. But in general, if someone got your healthcare information as a result of treating you, that is HIPAA covered. And if you gave it to them and they didn't get it as a result of them treating you, roughly speaking, it's FTC covered. But when we talk about these breach notifications, it's someone who had information that is not you. It's like not on my laptop. It doesn't count for my little MacBook Pro here. That's not a HIPAA breach if I write down that my healthcare conditions. But if my doctor loses control of that data, that's what we call a breach. And then HIPAA may or may not be invoked depending on the details. And I've looked through those files that you're talking about. And when they first came out, the big deal was somebody lost a laptop. Somebody had a laptop that was in their car, and it got stolen, and that technically is a breach, and that's bad. But there's 5,000 patients, 500 patients. These are low numbers, and that trend moving into the modern area of cyber warfare, where the breaches are much larger because we're talking about a database. Hospital databases are really large. That's a really disturbing trend. So thank you for that. Those details. This is very much the degree to which unethical actors can take advantage of the average patients using data that gets released. So this enforcement is a vital patient rights issue, and thank you for your work there. Do you have anything to add to clarify my clarification? Feel free. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next question.
Maybe. So just to clarify, and I think you said it well. So HIPAA doesn't apply to individuals. So and we've put out different materials over the years to help consumers. So when you get health information and you store it on your phone or on your own laptop, it's not going to be covered by HIPAA. HIPAA doesn't apply to individuals. It has limited jurisdiction. It's most healthcare providers, health plans, healthcare clearinghouses, and then their business associates. And so, a piece of the puzzle for consumers is be mindful of what you do with your health information too. Just as HIPAA regulated entities have to report breaches when there's an impermissible disclosure and your health information has been leaked or stolen, et cetera. If you're using apps that you're not really familiar with and they have access to your data, check the permissions that you're giving and be mindful of your own security. And you can go to our website. We have, if you just look up HIPAA Security Rule Guidance OCR, you'll find a suite of guidance, and particularly some of it aimed towards consumers to help them with their own mobile devices and cybersecurity.
Well, and let's be real specific here. What I don't want to create is work for you. The general rule of thumb is if somebody steals your medical record, your file folder with all your details in it from your doctor, that might be a HIPAA problem. If you get a copy of your medical record, which is something else that HIPAA actually gives you the access to do, and if you can't get it, you probably ought to talk to the OCR. But if you have a copy and you go to McDonald's and you leave it on the table, and then you come back and you remember it and you find it's gone, HIPAA doesn't help you there, right? McDonald's is not obligated to take care of that file folder. That's kind of your problem that you left it, and there's digital equivalents to that kind of extend there. But for those two occasions, when you want access to your record and your doctor won't necessarily give it to you, or hospital is not giving you access, talk to OCR. If they lost access to it and for some reason talk to OCR. Those are very much up your alley. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So are there potential recent or upcoming healthcare data policy or technical changes that you care about that you'd like to discuss at all?
That we care about?
You care about them all, but anything special?
Of course. So I think, as Tim alluded to, we are seeing pretty rapid growth in large breaches that are affecting the United States in healthcare. What do we know about those breaches? We know that they're happening more frequently than they used to, and they're happening pretty frequently. We also know that they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So earlier this year, United Healthcare Group through Change Health had a massive breach. That breach, according to our website and their filing, according to them, has been 100 million people. That's a lot of people, and to date, the biggest breach we've ever had in the U.S. history on this issue. And we expect that it might be even bigger than that. What does that mean for like everyday people, right? Like in my household, I live with my husband and my mom, and all three of us got breach notifications in the mail. The breach notifications were from Change Health. I think for me, obviously, I'm the OCR director, so I get a breach notification. I bring it in and show my team, look, I got the breach notification. For my mom, right, who's 75 and a senior citizen, she didn't know what it was, right? She just saw it was some company she'd never heard of, that her information was breached, and that she should do credit monitoring. And so I think the moral imperative here is like we have to do better in this space, both as the regulator here and the department, which we've been doing work across the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, but also as the regulated entities, right? So whether it's a health plan or a doctor or a clearinghouse, and that there is a shared equity and interest in this because nobody is served when our healthcare systems go offline. So if you can't go see your doctor, you're not able to get an insurance payment, your emergency department goes offline, that is in nobody's interest. And so there is very much a shared moral and responsible imperative here for us to move forward on this, which is why we've been doing a lot of work, bipartisan work, both with our colleagues in Congress, but also here at the department. And so one of the things HHS is really focused on is updating the HIPAA Security Rule. The HIPAA Security Rule has not been updated in over 2 decades. You can imagine, right, the days of like leaving a piece of paper on an airplane or a laptop on an airplane or dumping files behind, a clinic, they still happen, but that's not the most significant thing happening now that we have electronic protected health information. And so we know that we have all this enforcement experience. We know that the times have changed in terms of how we receive and deliver healthcare. And so it's really imperative for us to update these rules. And so we're in the process of doing that. And of course, we can't comment on what's the rule. In the rule, we can't, say to that, but we can say like this is a priority for us. We know that there's a lot of interest from our colleagues in Congress across both sides of the aisle because this is a national security issue. And this affects our healthcare system, this affects our economy, and this affects every single American across the country. And so it is really, really important that we keep our foot on the pedal and we keep working on this, because we have to do better for our healthcare systems. We have to do better for our patients across the country. And we know we have this huge problem, and shame on us if we can't actually be responsive to it.
Well, and do you have anything that's already out for public comment on those changes or not?
Not yet. It is public that the rule is coming. So I would encourage folks to, keep checking the news. One way to get information from OCR is to sign up for our listserv. So you can go to hhs.gov/OCR. On that webpage, there's a whole page just on HIPAA, and you can sign up for our listservs. And that's how you'll get information on webinars we do, information on YouTube videos, information on new rules and guidances and policies. When we do have a large law enforcement settlement where we're, some big hospital or clinic, and we've issued a penalty or we've entered into a settlement, that is where that information will be. And so I think it's really important for stakeholders to sign up for it.
Absolutely. And, whenever that regulation comes out, of course, I love to tweet those things. So I will tweet that. I'll see if I can update the show notes like after, so that
Sure.
when people are looking at this in a couple of months and that comes out, that they can find those links. We'll try to make sure that we remember to do that. Those are so important for people to engage with and kind of changing things. That's huge news. So thank you for letting me chat with you about that.
And once the rule is out, right, there will be an opportunity for public comment, which is a big part of how we do rulemaking across the U.S. government. And so, whether it's an organization or as an individual, there will be the opportunity to weigh in on that. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely. And we will do our best to help promote those things. We really like to engage with patients with that. And one of the most important things that patients can do, especially that have been impacted by cybersecurity events, is let people who are policymakers know what their experience was, because these are so complicated things. And a different type of phone that comes out in 6 months can totally revolutionize everything. I expect there'll be some interesting things coming in about AI that nobody's ever thought of before. Is there any other thing that you said in your session that you'd like to say again, more generally to the public?
I think we've talked a bit about cybersecurity and HIPAA, and I don't know if Tim wants to add anything to that. I'll give him the opportunity to do that. I would say the other area we're really focused on right now is artificial intelligence. So there's been a lot of discussion about this. There's a lot of discussion at Datapalooza about this. There's just been a lot of folks interested in what's happening. And I think it's really important to level set on the topic, right? I think if you read the news, if you're tangentially involved in social media, you might catch snippets here and there, and you might either think, oh my gosh, artificial intelligence is so bad, or you might think, oh my gosh, artificial intelligence is so good, right? And I think the bottom line is it's here. It's not going anywhere. And it's really important for folks to remember that, one, it does have tremendous potential. We know, for example, we have an aging baby boomer population that will soon have needs like Medicare, soon have needs like disability needs, but we do not have enough providers in the market. When we think about things like just as simple as helping transcribe notes, those can be really helpful things for the retention in the provider workforce, right? And thinking about these kinds of challenges is really important. Now, that's not my job. I just say that in that we have this very real present problem. However, right, the law hasn't changed. Just because there's new tools in place doesn't mean that like HIPAA doesn't apply to you. It doesn't mean that civil rights laws don't apply to you. And so I think it's really important for folks to sort of just take a beat and remember that and think about that. And, OCR has taken steps on artificial intelligence civil rights to be very clear about what is expected in the regulated community. So, for example, under 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, we know that if you're going to use artificial intelligence as a covered entity, that there are things you should be looking for, right? If you're using a tool that inputs race or gender or sex, you have to be cognizant of the potential impact that it might be harmful to your patient population. You need to be working with the developer. You need to be thinking about those kinds of questions. And once you do decide to use it, thinking about how am I using this in a way that's safe for my patient population? How am I making sure I'm keeping transparency over how this is used in my system and making sure in real time I'm able to monitor its impact to my patient population? And I think that those are really important things that this rule lays out, and we could have a whole webinar to talk about that. But I think, the rule goes into effect this upcoming summer. Folks have time. We've been going around the country and talking a lot about it, but we think it's a really scalable, technology neutral model that allows for the development of artificial intelligence while also putting safeguards in place to make sure it's not misused. On HIPAA has also not changed as a law. Tim, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. As Melanie said, with anytime there's new technology, there can be a little bit of a disconnect within organizations, and sometimes there's a rush to implement the technology or people involved in marketing. We've seen that with some of the use of online tracking technologies, where those get placed on a healthcare entity's website, but there was no communication with the privacy officer or the HIPAA experts within that organization. And so what OCR wants to do is just remind people that the old laws, the old rules continue to apply. Anytime you introduce anything into your information environment, it should be part of a regulated entity's risk analysis, and they should be putting it through their normal HIPAA process. A couple of things, if I may, just to highlight. So last month was Cybersecurity Month. Every Cybersecurity Month, every October, we tried to issue new materials to be helpful for the regulated industry. And so last year, we issued a couple of videos, one on common cyber attacks that we see from OCR investigations. And so we talk about some of the trends that we see, some of the common attack vectors, what were some of the weaknesses that led to or contributed to the breaches. We also did a video, a webinar on the risk analysis requirement in the HIPAA Security Rule. That's one of the most common violations we find. So we walk people through what you need to do to comply with that rule, what is required, what are the common deficiencies, again, that we see in investigations. And then I say last month, we did a new video on ransomware. That's becoming an increasing trend. We walked through the ransomware guidance that we published a few years ago, analysis of the ransomware attack chain, again, common issues and themes in OCR investigations. And then finally, also for last month, we issued a new cybersecurity newsletter. And this one's really interesting. It's on social engineering. And so it discusses some of the most common attacks that we see, the phishing, smishing, which for those that aren't up to date on all their cyber terminology, that's basically a phishing attack involving texting, smishing, baiting, leaving a flash drive in a parking lot with, employees' salaries, as the title, so that somebody will plug it into their system and it starts loading in malware. And then the use of deep fakes and how that's changing everything. And so, as I say, every Cybersecurity Month, we try to pick something that's really topical and relevant to what's happening in the industry. And I think this year's materials are really excellent for folks.
I live in a little bit of trepidation. I just don't know that my father's generation really understands the implications of the fact that there's enough. In fact, we're making more, right? I'm making audio right now that someone could use the audio from this video to make my voice, call my father with my voice. That's really a hard thing to get your mind around, that those kinds of attacks are possible. And of course, there are problems when people use those techniques to attack hospital CEOs. All of a sudden, that now becomes something that might spill over into your arena. Those are complicated problems. And you have given me so much time already. Thank you. Is there anything else just in general you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I think just two last points before we wrap up. One, so we didn't even cover, but we have a new HIPAA privacy rule to support reproductive health care. It took effect this summer. We'll start enforcing it December 23rd, 2024. Well, what does that mean for your listeners and for folks out in the world? Well, we know that after the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade, we saw a lot of instances where individuals might travel somewhere to get lawful reproductive health care. They might get health care in their home state to get lawful reproductive health care. But because it was reproductive health care and potentially abortion, we saw that cases of people trying to seek people's healthcare data because they just merely sought, facilitated, provided, obtained that care were going up, and that people were trying to target this sort of healthcare and weaponize it for criminal, civil, or administrative prosecution, again, for merely seeking or obtaining this law for reproductive health care. that we saw this happening across the country. And so we've actually started a new rule that we talked about. It's already taken effect. We'll start enforcing it in December 23rd, 2024, that we would prohibit the use and disclosure of that data in those instances. So when it is lawful reproductive health care under state or federal law, when those instances are, again, for the mere act of just obtaining, providing, facilitating that care, that lawful care. So that's going to start being enforced in December. We have a model attestation up on our website for the community out in the world who are providers or plans that may have to then provide this information, because it doesn't preclude law enforcement when they continue to seek other purposes of the data outside of that prohibited reason. And so this attestation is out there. We've created it to help the law enforcement community make it as easy as possible for them. And so more to come from us on that, but I just wanted to flag that because we will start enforcing that next month. And then I want to remind, to the extent your listeners are patients.
Let me interrupt you just real quick.
Yeah.
Just for the listeners and also for my video editor, we're going to add the link to those in the show notes. So we're going to put in the show notes, look down there, and you'll find a link to those regulations, and you can learn more there. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So, and just to break it down, right? So like you have a person, a woman who is traveling from one state to another because her home state has banned the kind of care, lawful reproductive care she seeks. She's going somewhere else to get it, right? So when she goes to get that care, it is legal. And then when she goes home, because law enforcement might be targeting her records, she might be too scared to get further follow-up care. She might be too scared to confide in her provider. This rule would protect her medical records when she travels to the state for the lawful reproductive care, and when she's home, right, her provider that had nothing to do with that care. Again, trying to reinstill that provider patient confidentiality and trust. Or, if someone's just seeking lawful reproductive health care in their home state and someone's seeking to weaponize that data, this would preclude, again, if the person's just merely seeking, obtaining, providing, facilitating that care, this would preclude the use and disclosure of that information, which we think is really important to the provider-patient relationship. And so again, we have a YouTube video on our website, we have a toolkit, we have fact sheets, we have a lot of resources that are, not a 300-page regulation, knowing that not everyone wants to read that. And so we can make sure we follow up with those links, Fred, so that you have them for your listeners to make them more accessible. And then the last thing I will just say, look, we have given you a lot of information. Obviously, we're very passionate about your privacy and your security of your health information. And we take that very seriously. It's a national security issue. It's an issue of patient confidentiality and trust in their providers and healthcare system. So if you or anyone feels like you've been discriminated against, or you think that your privacy or security rights have been violated, you can file a complaint with the Office for Civil Rights. Again, you can go to hhs.gov/OCR. This page has different information, but it also teaches you how to file a complaint. And what I like to remind folks is you don't have to be a lawyer to file a complaint. You could file a complaint on the back of a napkin, right? You don't have to know the exact law associated with your complaint. That's what our team will help you suss out. But if you do feel like you or someone has been violated, we would encourage you to file a complaint, or at least visit our website and get additional information. And we think that's really important because, not everyone knows that they have privacy rights. Not everyone knows that they have civil rights. We're a small office, and so allowing for these kinds of conversations with organizations like yours are really important in making sure that the public understands their rights and how to utilize them.
Well, and let me just say, if a web URL was so important that you would say it in an interview and spell it out, then it's also important enough for us to make sure it goes into our show notes. And so if you are listening to this, which you might be years from now, it might be many, many years after Datapalooza, the function of OCR to maintain privacy and to ensure that really critical privacy issues, just like the one we're talking about right now, is going to be ongoing. So I think these kinds of links are going to be evergreen. And if you're listening to this video in 2034, things will probably still work, and this is probably still the right place to go and file a complaint. Or if not, it'll have a, this page is moved, and you'll be able to figure it out. So with that, Tim, Melanie, it's always charming to talk to you. I was so impressed with our first conversation, and you strike me as very thoughtful policymakers. And I know that not every patient who your work impacts will ever get the chance to say thank you. So I'm going to say thank you for your work. I really appreciate your service. I don't have anything else. Are we good?
Nope. Thank you so
Goodbye,
much.
everybody.